Are you a perfectionist? Are you a perfectionist in recovery? Me too. I think it's time that we talked about it. Stay tuned. Oh, perfectionism, my old friend. That song comes to mind. Hello, darkness, my old friend. It does feel like a weirdly comforting old blanket, yet one that's very harmful and has created a lot of challenge in my life personally, and I'm sure in many of your lives out there as well. So, perfectionism. What do I mean by that? Basically, perfectionism, from where I sit, is the pursuit of extremely high expectations, usually of self, but perfectionism can also start to spill over onto the world around. Perfectionism is rooted in a desire for control. For a lot of people who struggle with perfectionism, they may have had experiences in their lives, particularly their younger lives, where maybe they felt a bit out of control. Things felt maybe unmanageable, or things were happening in their lives that they didn't understand. So perfectionism, doing things and doing them well, became a coping mechanism to give them a sense of ownership over their life. For others, it might have also been an adaptive mechanism that if there was dysfunction or conflict, addiction, mental health issues in the family growing up, perfectionism is a nice way to try and hide from all of that, both from the world as well as from your family. So for being a perfectionist, what do I mean by that? In that particular set of circumstances, it means that you're kind of the golden child. So you don't get much attention, and if you do get attention, it's generally pretty positive. Like, oh, good. I'm glad that you did well on that test, or that you achieved well at that sport or that event. It keeps kind of the heat off of you, so to speak, that it prevents a lot of that maybe unwanted negative attention or energy from being directed on you. It can also be an appeasement, people-pleasing, fawning mechanism that if you're trying to keep things perfect, you're also trying to keep those waters smooth. So the long and the short of it is that perfectionism, we can look at it as an adaptive coping or defense mechanism, which has its time and its place. But of course, as with any coping or defense mechanism, it can then also start to have its downsides and its consequences as time goes on. And there's usually a point where people start to realize the consequences or the downsides of their perfectionism. Some of the more common ones that I've heard are people who get just absolutely burnt out. It's really hard to maintain the high standards that a perfectionist carries. People may start to get physical symptoms. They might get physical illness or disease because of the stress and the strain that their system has been under for so long in the continued pursuit of perfectionism. It can cause issues in relationships. If the perfectionism especially starts to spill out onto the people around you, often people don't like feeling controlled or feeling like they have to meet these certain expectations dictated or directed by you in order to feel loved or accepted. So it can create conflict, it can create distance, it can create kind of a lack of connection as it really disintegrates the intimacy that might be possible in those relationships. It can usually lead to external success. So people may be pretty successful in their careers, their academic pursuits, even some of their hobbies. But the downside, physically, emotionally, and interpersonally, as well as emotionally, did I say that one? I think I did, become huge. Like it just deteriorates the mind, body, soul, and relationships. So those become the real costs of perfectionism. So, what happens once you realize that you're engaged in perfectionist behavior? Maybe you're realizing that you have high standards, you're trying to control the world around you, and maybe that's how you view perfectionism. Maybe it's not necessarily that you're always trying to pursue the best or perfection at something. Maybe you can also think of it that you're trying to control the uncontrollable. I'd say that's another great way to think about perfectionism. So once recognize that you're engaged in that pursuit, now what? Well, the life of recovery for someone who struggles with perfectionism, I'm not going to lie, it's not always easy. As with any change, it's hard to go against and go back on those deep-rooted programs and habits that we've cultivated over the years, and especially when we're trying to challenge a coping mechanism. And that's true of so many parts of addiction and mental health, that at root, we are trying to correct a coping mechanism that just no longer has the coping value that we would hope it to have. So we're trying to basically push against our internal systems, which are saying we need to keep doing this for survival. And here we are coming in and saying we need to stop doing this for our ability to thrive moving forward. The life of recovery for a perfectionist can involve starting to establish different boundaries, really starting to look at your commitments, what you've taken on, what's yours to own and do, what's necessary, and what you can start to give back to other people because it's rightfully theirs, or you can start asking for help because you need it. Or you can start saying no because you recognize you just do not have the time or the capability on your plate anymore to keep saying yes to all of the things that you've said yes to. So boundaries are an important part of recovery for a perfectionist. Being able to say no, being able to look at the expectations that you're carrying and challenge those expectations becomes a second essential and very critical step. You need to understand what's been driving your perfectionist behavior. If you don't, it's probably going to be challenging to engage in long-term recovery from your perfectionism because those old beliefs and values and programming, they're going to creep in there and they're going to pull you back into that perfectionist pursuit if you don't become more aware of what are some of the origins and the roots of your particular brand of perfectionism. So is it rooted in past family programming and messages? Is it values that you've internalized from society? Is it rooted in trauma? Is it rooted in a desire for control where you felt out of control? Where did it come from? So that when you're noticing some of those old thoughts as well as familiar feelings pop up, maybe it's the feeling of feeling out of control or feeling powerless or feeling helpless or feeling afraid, that those are some of the triggers for your perfectionism. Obviously, awareness doesn't in and of itself heal everything completely, but the awareness helps give us an opportunity, a choice point for doing something different. So if I recognize when I'm afraid, that's when I'm often going to step into perfectionism to try and cover up and avoid that fear. The next time that I feel afraid, now I can be more aware, okay, I'm more vulnerable right now to relapsing into perfectionism. So what are my choices? What are my options for doing something different? And that's another part of recovery from perfectionism, is learning and practicing doing things differently. So having different boundaries, having different standards for yourself, having different expectations, perhaps even letting go of some expectations, translating it more into goals rather than expectations, which can be very rigid and very fixed. And also just taking care of yourself, learning how to have fun. Fun is often a difficult one for perfectionists, and learning how to rest. You may want to check out another video that I did on learning how to rest if you're a perfectionist in recovery or if you've struggled with knowing how to rest. Rest is a skill that we have to build. It's not something that will come naturally, and especially for a perfectionist, it can be a very challenging thing. Do I believe that there's hope for people who have struggled with perfectionism in the past? 1,000,000,000%. Absolutely. There's so much opportunity for growth and change. And I can just say for myself, the sense of freedom and empowerment that comes in stepping away from perfectionism into reality is just immense. And there's no greater feeling than being able to sit comfortably within yourself, knowing you've done what you can, you've let go of the rest, you're taking care of yourself, and it gives you space and time to enjoy life. We only get one life, at least that's what I believe, in this state, in this phase. And so why not try and make it the best possible life that we can while we're here? Do we want to spend our lives just grinding and pushing and working and fatiguing? Honestly, I really hope that you'll choose a different path, because most people that I've seen, they hit a wall with that other path of the grind and eventually recognize that something has to change. And by that point, a lot of people have a lot of regret and sadness about the time and the experiences and the relationships that have been lost. So I hope that wherever you're at right now, you can grab on to this idea of doing something different and challenge yourself to be a little bit more loose and flexible in your expectations and your standards of yourself and the world, so that you can actually enjoy this life that you're living. Thank you so much for watching. I am so appreciative of you taking the time to sit down and spend some time with me watching this video. I appreciate each and every one of you, and I wish you the best. Take care.